Chapter 61, Crisis, High Orders Attack 1. Sector 6, inside the corruption field within the central plaza. Boom! A corrupted being was sent flying as a flash of an arrow pierced through it. Rock Landing then rushed forward with his bow, aiming down at the group of corrupted beings. Arrows shot out one after another, piercing every corrupted being that came his way. Far away, waves of thorny trees erupted from the ground, binding a group of low-level corrupted beings. Then, following a single sword slash, all of the bound creatures were chopped into pieces. Evan landed on the ground with a solemn expression. "Thanks for the support, Ellen." Ellen, who stood beside him, nodded and released waves of healing wood energy. She was an elemental evolver. Her main element was wood. Evan looked around. Just like them, there were many other evolvers fighting against the corrupted monsters. Is there no end to this? How are there so many corrupted beings inside this corruption field? Hey you, watch out. I'm injured, someone help. The entire area had turned into a battlefield. And this wasn't the only corruption field within Sector 6, there were more. On the other side, a lone figure stood silently. Her eyes were calm and cold. Ahead of her, a horde of corrupted beings charged forth like a black tide. True ice style, first form, Alyssa spoke indifferently. Her entire body shimmered with an icy blue light as hundreds of icicles manifested behind her. With a wave of her hand, the icicles shot forward. Boom! The icicles rained down on the corrupted beings like arrows, each one landing precisely on target. Then, with a flick of her fingers, her hands shone with silver light, and instantly, every corrupted being froze in place. The civilians trapped within the corruption field were in awe. Look at that, that's Alyssa, the top genius of Nova City. Thank God, with her here, we'll be saved. However, before their relief could settle, the civilians who were standing and watching suddenly froze. Blood began to gush from their noses as they collapsed to the ground one by one. What? Panic erupted among the remaining civilians as they ran in all directions. Near the fallen civilians now stood a man wearing a black robe, his face hidden beneath the hood. A cruel smirk stretched across his lips as red corrupted energy coursed through his body. "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm codename Black 04, a member of the High Order," the man said, grinning wickedly as he fixed his gaze on Alyssa. "Pleased to make your acquaintance." Alyssa stared deeply at the guy and then at the fallen civilian, and immediately her expression became cold. "What did those poor people do to you?" Alyssa asked closely as she strode forward. "They are mere worms, what difference would it make whether they died or lived?" The High Order member smirked and said, "That matter aside, Miss Alyssa, the great genius of Nova City, today I'm here to take your life today." Alyssa didn't reply. Instead she began walking towards the man with cold gaze. Seeing that, Black 04 charged forward with a dagger in hand, dark crimson corruption energy swirling around it. But just as he was about to reach her, absolute zero. Buzz. For a brief moment, everything slowed down. Black 04's expression froze mid-charge, and before he could even comprehend what had happened, a thick layer of ice spread through his body. In an instant, he was completely frozen, then shattered into countless shards of ice dust. The civilians who had fled earlier stopped and turned back, staring at Alyssa in awe. She stood like a goddess, silent, untouchable, and terrifyingly powerful. With just a few words, she had obliterated her enemy. Alyssa turned toward the other end of the corruption field. Due to the field's distorted internal space, the area had expanded significantly, yet she could still see across it. In the distance, she saw several other black-robed figures like Black 04 attacking the city's evolvers. Sector 4. Arg. An evolver fell to the ground, blood gushing from his chest. Beside him stood another man wearing the same black robe as Black 04. "For the Order," the man roared as he charged forward. One by one, the evolvers rushing toward him collapsed before they could even get close. Sector 1, Central District, City Lord Mansion. Inside the mansion's meeting room sat three men. One was City Lord Liebert. The second was Torren Ironfang, patriarch of the Ironfang family. And the third was Alaric Duskwood, the ancestor of the Duskwood line. The situation is grim, Torren said. He was a middle-aged man, strong and solid, with a plain face and a neatly trimmed beard. There are over 13 corruption fields, each the size of a football stadium, appearing across Nova City at once. All signs point to the High Order and the Tiger Claw gang working together. Alaric leaned lightly on his cane. His hair was white, his face lined with age, yet his posture and eyes radiated power, the presence of a veteran evolver. "They're unpredictable," Alaric said calmly. "The High Order never follows a set pattern. We can't anticipate their next move. Every evolver in the city is fighting inside the corruption fields," Torren added. "The situation is still under control, for now." Liebert's eyes narrowed. "Control? My daughter is in their custody. How can you say this is under control?" Alaric's gaze met his. "Boy Liebert, they have your daughter, and my grandson, Cedric. Both are being used as bait. This is a trap." Liebert's aura surged, shaking the air. "I don't care if it's a trap or not. I'm getting her back." Hearing that, both Alaric and Torren sighed. "Since it's come to this, we have no choice," Alaric said, rising to his feet. "We'll go together and bring our children back. Torren will hold the city while we move. Cedric and Lia are both geniuses, we can't afford to lose them. Most importantly, they're our blood." Torren nodded firmly. "Understood. I'll secure the city. Nothing moves without my command." Liebert clenched his fists. "Then let's move. For Lia, for Cedric, for Nova City." At the same time, somewhere within Sector 1, a man in a black suit was walking quietly. His face was plain, expressionless, and calm. In front of him was a corruption field. As he stepped inside, the dark red miasma instantly dispersed, the area returned to normal. The civilians trapped inside looked around in disbelief. Then, their eyes all turned toward the man who had just entered. They stared at him in awe. The man's face remained blank and emotionless. This man was none other than Albert, Lia's butler. He turned his gaze southward, toward the distance. "Don't worry, Miss Lia," Albert said softly. "I'm coming. I'll save you." The moment those words left his mouth, a terrifying beastly energy burst from his body. Long wings stretched out from his back, his eyes turning slit-like. Then, with a thunderous boom, he shot into the sky, leaving several sonic booms in his wake as he flew toward the southern part of Nova City, where Sector 6 lay. Chapter 62, Crisis, High Orders Attack 2. Sector 6, Warehouse, B64. Lia slowly opened her eyes with great difficulty. She looked around her with a grim expression on her face. To her right was a guy sitting on a chair, one leg over the other, sharpening his long blade with his black nails, sending sparks flying as he worked on the edges. It was none other than Zereth, who had introduced himself to her before. "Oh." Seeing Lia wake up, Zereth spoke. "Did you have a good nap?" "You." Lia's expression twisted into one of rage. "Where is Maris? What did you do to her?" She knew that her friend had acted out only to protect her own family. She didn't blame her. Maris was just an ordinary girl. She had no choice but to obey. "Oh, her." Zereth tilted his head with a smile. "Look to your right." Lia did as he said, and the scene made her eyes open wide in horror. To the side lay Maris, with no life in her eyes. "You bastard!" Lia screamed out as tears rolled down her cheeks. She tried to stand up, but she realized that she couldn't move her body or sense her energy. To make things worse, she was tied up with her hands behind her back, completely cuffed. Tap, tap, tap. Just then, someone walked into the warehouse. Seeing the person, Lia's eyes widened in shock. Walking in was a young man who looked about the same age as Lia. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. It was none other than Cedric Duskwood. "You're back," Zereth said. "Did you handle the evolvers who wandered in?" "I sent 'em down to hell," Cedric said with a casual smirk on his face. Then, his eyes fell onto Lia, who was on the ground, staring at him with disbelief and shock. Lia Nova, we met faster than you expected, huh? His smirk twisted into a cruel smile. You, Cedric, what are you doing with this being? Lia asked in shock. She no longer knew what was happening. A corruption field, a being that didn't look human, and now a human who was the direct descendant of a prestigious family in Nova City was colluding with this being who created the corruption fields. Hearing her, Cedric burst into laughter. You still don't understand anything, do you? Then, let me explain it to you, Cedric said with an evil grin. This is a setup to completely eliminate Liebert and Tauren from Nova City. They are the only mid-stage second rankers in Nova City, and eliminating them will directly allow the Duskwood family and the High Order to effectively turn Nova City into our base. What? Lia was shaken. You are colluding with the High Order. How could you betray the human race? Is Lord Alaric aware of this? Haha, is grandfather aware of this? Cedric grinned evilly. He is the one who formed this plan in the first place. And besides, how is it betraying when the Duskwood family has always been a follower of the High Order since countless years ago? In case you didn't know by now, the Tiger Claw gang was formed by the Duskwood family. Lia couldn't speak properly anymore. The Duskwood family had a connection to the High Order long ago. She couldn't process anything properly anymore, and they were the ones behind the Tiger Claw gang. But don't worry, Lia, Cedric smiled sweetly like a lunatic. Once that old bastard Liebert is dead and the entire Nova family is uprooted from Nova City, I'll still keep you alive. You will become my harem member and serve as my maid. You disgusting dog, Lia spat, utterly disgusted. If this numbing potion fades away, I'll take your head. However, just as they were talking, a sound of an explosion rang out in the distance. Both Cedric and Xerath turned to look at the source of the explosion. It was coming from a warehouse not far from the one they were in. Cedric, Xerath spoke, annoyed. Go deal with whatever that is. Yes, young Master Xerath, Cedric replied respectfully and withdrew from the warehouse to check on the explosion. However, just as he left, a few minutes later another explosion rang out, and this time it came from the opposite side. Who is it? Xerath frowned. Looks like there's more than one small fry. He then glanced at Lia, who was looking back at him with a hateful expression. Stay still, human. As he said that, he strode toward the opposite side of the warehouse. Entering the area of the explosion, he saw a huge crater, and inside it, a broken part of a drone. Buzz. However, as soon as he looked down, a bright light flashed into his vision, and his ears began ringing continuously. Following that, a whirlwind formed where he stood and completely covered him, wind blades rushing toward Xerath. Warehouse B64. Mimi. The sound of a cat meowing rang out within the quiet warehouse, and a silver blur flashed across it. Lia, seeing this, became alert, but before she could react further, she saw a cat-like creature land next to her, and to her disbelief, sword energy rushed out of its body, cutting the cuffs tying her hands. Tap, tap, the sound of footsteps rang out. Lia slowly turned her head toward the direction of the sound. There, she saw a man with long black hair, an extremely handsome face, flashing purple eyes, and a smirk on his lips walking toward her. Looks like I'm just in time. You didn't die. The guy's voice, for some reason, made Lia feel a surge of relief wash over her. Like a huge weight had been lifted off her shoulders. The guy was none other than Gray Lockhart. Gray. Leah's eyes watered up. Gray. She called out to him as she wept. I didn't trust my intuition this time, like you told me. Lia said with teary eyes. My friend, she is dead. I couldn't do anything. Hearing this, Gray simply shook his head slightly, then took Lia into his embrace from the ground and held her close to his chest. You indeed didn't trust your intuition, Gray said with a sigh. And to make matters worse, the protagonist isn't even here. Then, as if remembering something, LIA spoke in a hurried tone. "We should leave quick. Cedric and that being, they're still here." "I know." Gray nodded. "That's why we're leaving now. If I make a run for it, we should be able to escape the corruption field in a few minutes." Chapter 63, Crisis, High Orders Attack 3. Gray had already begun moving the instant he got a call from LIA. He tried to call her back, but the instant the call went through, the signal was said to be switched off. It was definitely something Gray couldn't overlook, and thinking about the omen of death LIA carried, he was certain something had happened to her. Being his personal wallet and someone with endless potential, he couldn't let LIA die. Hence, he set off. He had no direction, so he asked for Eterna's help, and she did help him, but it was all for naught, as according to Eterna, her network was jammed the moment LIA entered some cafe near the inner district. This made them realize that it was a coordinated attack that also eliminated Eterna from taking action. With no choice left, for the first time ever, he utilized his mind interface link art and hacked into the database of Nova City for information. It took him almost an hour to crack the encrypted, security-packed server, but he managed to get in and finally gain information on LIA, and that information thankfully came from a cab service. It even had the exact location she was dropped off at. Sector 6, abandoned warehousing. He didn't hesitate anymore. After preparing some defensive mechanisms, he traveled to Sector 6 and entered the corruption field LIA was in, unnoticed by anyone. With his drones in full effect, he had eyes everywhere, and he stealthily entered the warehouse where LIA was kept with his stealth drone and eavesdropped on their conversation. Then, he placed some distractions by detonating 2 drones and a radiant petal storm array. He took this chance to free LIA and leave before both of them escaped the trap he had set up. However, just as Gray was about to run away, a crimson beam of energy shot toward him at bottleneck speed. Gray's eyes contracted. Immediately, his spatial ring flashed, and a talisman flew into the air. Boom! The attack hit the talisman with intricate patterns, and immediately, the disappeared beam manifested once again and shot straight back to the place it came from. Abyssal wall. Instantly, a black wall of energy formed in front of the caster, and the barrier directly blocked the beam before cracking and disappearing, leaving smoke across the warehouse. Your comprehension defies the heaven. By hearing the abyssal language, you've comprehended abyssal language. Seeing this, Gray's expression became grim. He escaped my drone's detection, Gray thought in dread. The smoke vanished and revealed Xerath standing at the entrance of the warehouse with an enraged expression. "I don't know who you are," Xerath spoke slowly, giving each word some weight. "But if you dare to disrupt the High Order's plan and stand in our way, I will gut you down inch by inch." As he said that, he inched closer to Gray. Seeing this, Gray's expression became solemn, while LIA had a look of terror. "Gee Gray, it's that being. I can sense that he's very powerful. You won't be able to defeat him. Let's run, please." However, to her dismay, Gray softly placed her in the corner of the warehouse and spoke gently. "I'm afraid it's too late for that. We won't be able to run now. That guy, he's a level 9, first ranker," Gray said with a helpless smile. But Gray's eyes flashed. "Don't worry, I'm confident I can drag out this battle until someone else comes. Your comprehension defies the heaven. By trying to observe the other party's level, you've gained comprehension into the relationship between the information layer and the physical layer and gained the skill, appraisal. Power, first rank, level 9. You." Leah's eyes welled up with tears. "Why, you'll die." "No," Gray spoke with a smile. "I won't die." As he said that, an oppressive aura spread out. A powerful black-purple energy erupted from his body, and immediately, Gray's body underwent a transformation. Nexus overlock. Nexus energy surged into his body and brain like lightning. Instantly, purple-black lines with white dots appeared on Gray's hands, and intricate deep purple lines spread out from his eyes into his sclera. LIA was stunned seeing this. Coincidentally, She also felt an oppressive aura coming from Grey, the kind she had only felt from a mid-stage first ranker. By the time Grey was done transforming, Zereth had also inched closer, but there was now a frown on his face. What is that energy? Zereth asked with caution. The way Grey looked now was something he had never seen before, and most importantly, the instant the energy erupted from the human, his abyssal energy trembled slightly and retreated back into his energy field. I have no obligation to say anything to an abyssal being coming from the abyss, Grey spoke softly. Hearing this, Zereth's expression changed drastically. How do you know about the abyss? Zereth's voice was solemn. Nobody in this world knew about the abyss aside from the upper echelons of Blue Star and those who belonged to the High Order. Then how could a mere first-rank brat know about it? The abyss. Lia silently mumbled under her breath. Turns out, Grey knew something about the demonic being. You don't need to know, Grey said with a cold smile. But now that I'm looking at an abyssal being, those corrupted beings don't resemble you guys at all. I thought you both would have some resemblance, being ugly, but turns out you're even uglier than the corrupted beings. You're the one who's ugly. Zereth's expression darkened. How dare you insult my appearance? As he said that, he rushed toward Grey with bottleneck speed. Grey, seeing this, looked at the demon with a calm expression. He didn't move, he just let Zereth charge at him. At the same time, a crazed smirk formed on Grey's face. He had a plan in mind, and if done properly, he would survive another day. His previous plan of rescuing Lia unnoticed had flopped, and there was only one way to survive this, and that was to die. Zereth closed in with great momentum, and with immense force, he punched directly into Grey's stomach. Boom! A hole formed in Grey's stomach as blood profusely poured out of his mouth before he collapsed to the ground. Chapter 64, Surge in Power, The End 1. Grey. Lia's pupils shrank as a wave of dread washed over her. Kekekeke, Zereth grinned wickedly. This small fry, did he really think he could match my strength? I thought he'd be difficult to deal with. What a joke. At the same time, his frown deepened. Strange. This human's blood. It's not red. The blood oozing from Grey's body was purple-black, flecked with dim, glowing specks that shimmered faintly when they splattered on the ground. He honestly doubted whether this guy was human at all. And no. Lia's eyes went blank as she stared at Grey's fallen body. This can't be real. How can something like this happen? That guy's dead, human, Zereth said with a smirk. I thought he might be someone special, able to sense my true identity. I overestimated him, but he's just a small fry who knew too much. However, at the same time, neither Zereth nor Lia noticed the tidal wave of energy now surging through Grey's body. Death Ascension Art, activated. Buzz. An unknown power seeped into Grey's body. The wound in his stomach slowly closed as black-purple blood surged from his heart. Bar dump. Bar dump. His previously still heart began to beat again, growing stronger with each passing second. Dot. Creak. Boom. Nexus energy erupted from his body like a tidal wave, painting the area in a starry sky-like scene. The ground beneath him cracked and lifted, defying gravity as it floated. Buzz. Purple-black veins spread from Grey's eyes as he shot into the air, suspended mid-flight. His long hair broke free from its ponytail, flaring wildly. His eyes slowly opened, transformed, pupils pulsing with purple energy, black hole-like dots at their centers, with veins of violet creeping across his sclera. He extended his arm and spoke with calm precision. Zenith Sword Art, Myriad Swords. Swish, swish, swish. His spatial ring flashed, and swords wreathed in purple fire-like energy shot toward Zereth at blinding speed. Zereth's eyes widened in alarm. He spun to defend, but the swords were faster than he anticipated. Shit, Zereth cursed, chanting an abyssal spell. Abyssal wall. Swish, boom, srrkt. The flying sword slammed against his barrier, tearing slightly into it before throwing him back. Grey's feet touched the ground lightly, and at that moment, a wave of energy burst outward. His body's energy field expanded, reconstructing itself with greater space. Muscles tightened, nerves strengthened, and bones solidified. Nexus energy bathed his entire body, his psionic pool churned, and his sea of consciousness expanded. First rank, level 2. Gray. Leah's voice trembled with disbelief. Hearing Leah's call, Gray didn't reply. His focus was entirely on Zereth, who now looked at him with a flicker of surprise. "You broke through?" Zereth asked, a trace of doubt in his voice. Then he laughed, cold and scornful. "But do you really think breaking through once is enough to defeat me, you puny low-level brat?" Swish, boom. He shot forward at bottleneck speed, tearing the air around him. Before he could reach Gray, another wave of energy surged outward. Another breakthrough. First rank, level 3. Gray waved his hand. Nexus energy formed intricate patterns in the air. Crimson Fang surge. Condensed beams of Nexus energy shot straight toward Zereth. Boom. The beams clashed head-on, sending Zereth flying slightly backward. "Why you?" Zereth's face twisted in disbelief. How are you suddenly stronger?" He realized Gray had broken through again, his strength now rivaling a 7th rank evolver. Yet it didn't stop. Another wave of energy swept from Gray. First rank, level 4. Gray waved his hand, and the warehouse crumbled. The ground beneath him cracked and rose, forming sharp jagged structures. Purple flames danced over them and surged toward Zereth with unstoppable momentum. This is telekinesis," Zereth exclaimed. "Weren't you an immortal cultivator?" Judging by Gray's attacks so far, he had assumed Gray was an immortal cultivator, but now, it was clear he was also utilizing psionic energy. "Telekinesis," Lia whispered under her breath. "I knew it." Zereth's expression grew deadly serious. He could no longer hold back. It was time to play his full hand. "Abyssal convergence," he shouted in abyssal tongue. Missile-like shots were sucked into a black globe of energy before detonating harmlessly. "I never said anything about that," Gray said coldly, a small smile forming. "In fact, I'll just stand here and let someone else do the work. Mimi, you're up." As soon his words fell, a flash of silver streaked toward Zereth, and to his shock, it was a small cat. Before he could react, the cat slapped him across the face with a cheerful smile. "Mimi." Buzz. Boom. The moment her tiny paws landed, the world flashed black and white. Zereth was hurled skyward as gray energy erupted from Mimi's hand, air twisting violently around him. "Ha!" Zereth muttered in disbelief, hovering in the air as he stared at the cat. Even Lia was dumbfounded. What sort of godly cat is this? It had just sent a late-stage first-ranker flying across the map. But it wasn't over. Mimi's fur crackled with gray energy as it shot upward like a bolt of lightning, the ground beneath it splintering from the sheer force. "You filthy animal!" Zereth roared as dense black energy erupted from him. "You deserve to die." He charged downward as a sword flashed into his hand, propelling himself with abyssal energy. Mimi meowed sharply and tried to dodge, but it was too late. The dense black energy from Zereth's sword struck it. In an instant, it and the energy vanished, leaving a crater behind. Zereth landed gracefully on the ground after dispatching the cat, then glared at Gray. What is that creature? It's clearly not a mutated beast. It gives off no beastly energy. How can it possibly reach this level of strength?" Gray merely smiled. "You can ask it yourself." The air around him distorted, and the cat dropped to the ground. Quote exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark quote. Zereth's expression froze. It was the same cat he had disintegrated moments ago. Before he could react further, Mimi charged once more, meowing happily. Waves of sword energy erupted from its body, racing straight toward Zereth. Mimi. Chapter 65, Surge in Power, The End 2. Zereth immediately activated Abyssal Wall and tried to dodge the incoming sword energy, but as he moved, Mimi closed in on him. She leaped into the air from behind and kicked Zereth forward, straight toward Gray. Gray, seeing this, flashed a smirk. He clenched his fists and punched forward with all his strength. Boom! The punch connected directly into Zereth's stomach as Nexus energy surged, amplifying the force of the attack. Ugh! Zereth's expression twisted in agony as he was sent flying right back toward Mimi. The moment that happened, another wave of energy exploded from Gray. Another breakthrough. First rank, level 5. Mimi's aura likewise surged upward. However, just then, the battlefield shifted. Zereth, who had been sent flying, suddenly halted midair. Dense black energy erupted from him, even more sinister than before. "You inferior animals!" Zereth roared as his silhouette expanded. "That's enough playing around. Now, this young master will personally send you off into the deepest part of hell." His horns grew larger, his legs elongated and became sturdier, and a third eye abruptly split open at the center of his forehead. The moment it opened, a beam of pure destruction shot out toward Gray. However, before it could reach him, the mind field around Gray negated the attack. Having reached level 5, his mind perception underwent a qualitative leap. It now covered a 90-meter radius, allowing him to influence anything within that range freely. But that wasn't the important part right now. What mattered was eliminating the threat in front of him. The abyssal being who called himself Zereth finally released the full aura of a 9th level, first rank evolver. Since that was the case, Gray had to go all out as well. Flying swords flashed from afar and lined up behind him in neat formation. He quickly called Mimi back. It was time to turn it into a sword. Swordsmanship was the only weapon art he had mastered so far, but in the future, he would naturally learn more, one day, becoming a true weapon master. Why am I even thinking about that right now? Gray clicked his tongue slightly and focused his gaze on the calm Zereth, who had landed back on the ground, waiting for Gray to make his move. Mimi vanished from sight and materialized in Gray's hand as a sword, a long black blade with purple-white circular patterns along its edge. The instant Gray poured sword energy into it, the circles lit up in a deep violet glow, giving it an extremely domineering aura. With Gray in his Nexus overlock state and his sword in hand, he looked like a death god descending upon the mortal world. What even is happening? Lia was so shocked that she could no longer process what she was seeing. This no longer felt like a battle between evolvers, but rather a clash between mythical entities. She had no idea what techniques or abilities either side was using. None of this existed in any recorded combat. Ordinary first-rankers threw fireballs at each other, yet here they were, firing beams of annihilation that shook the entire abandoned district. One attack had even destroyed the entire warehouse in a single strike. And what was even more unbelievable was Gray's strength. He was going toe-to-toe with a late-stage first-ranker. And he had only awakened a week ago. "What's wrong, human worm?" Zereth sneered coldly. "Are you scared after witnessing my true form?" He snickered viciously. "Don't worry, I'll make your death quick." Boom! The ground beneath him shattered as he charged toward Gray at terrifying speed, the pressure alone sending even Lia flying backward. But before she could crash, a gentle force caught her and tossed her out of the battlefield. Gray had used Heaven's seizing hand to send her away from danger. Zereth reached Gray in an instant and swung his longsword at bottleneck speed, dense abyssal energy trailing behind it like a comet. Gray reacted, Nexus energy surged into his brain, slowing the world even further. With speed surpassing Zereth's, he swung Mimi at him. Krrrshhhhk. Their swords collided, fierce energy dancing along the edges of their blades. The very air warped as they clashed, locked in a deadlock as neither could overpower the other. Their figures flickered and vanished from sight. In the next moment, they reappeared beside another still-standing warehouse, only for their swords to collide again, instantly reducing the structure to rubble. Chunks of debris rose into the air, twisting and sharpening under sword energy. Covered in a purple sheen, they rained down on Zereth like a storm of falling stars. Abyssal convergence. Zereth roared. A black globe of energy formed, sucking in the incoming attacks. But instead of detonating it immediately, Zereth hurled it straight at Grey. The moment it neared him, it detonated. Swoosh! He didn't stop there. A black beam of annihilation burst out from the eye at the center of his forehead, tearing through the air as it struck the spot where Grey stood. But Grey was unharmed. He pushed his reflexes and sensory perception beyond their limits, moving faster than the explosion itself. He realized he could now draw even more from Nexus Overlock with his evolved mind, but a creeping headache warned him, if he kept forcing his limits, he would flatline from overstimulation. Since that was the case, he had to end this, now. Grey, faster than ever before, dashed forward and brought his sword down at a blinding speed, Nexus energy erupting from his vortex like a violent tide. Zereth tried to counter, gritting his teeth, but this time he realized, Grey had become even stronger. He could no longer hold back. Swish, boom, Zereth's counter failed, and he was sent flying into another warehouse. The shockwave shattered it instantly as he crashed through it. No, Zereth roared, blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. Now, Grey's eyes flickered with killing intent. He seized Zereth by the head and slammed it against the ground, dragging him across the shattered terrain before hurling him into the air. Sword energy surged like a tidal wave from his body, and he immediately followed with Crimson Fang surge. With his sword in hand, he unleashed Zenith Sword Arc to its absolute limit. Swish, 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 swish. He moved at speeds several times faster than sound, the air itself screeching as sword energy tore through Zereth. Countless streaks of cutting energy erupted in the area, shredding his flesh apart. Not giving Zereth even a moment to recover, Grey activated True Origin Sight, locating the core of Zereth's elixir field, and stabbed straight into it. Boom! A violent tide of black energy burst out as Zereth screamed in agony. Arg! It hurts. He convulsed as his elixir field shattered, energy rapidly draining from his body. Goodbye, abyssal being, Grey said with a calm smirk. In the end, not even an exalted abyssal being like you could stop me. As he said that, he drove his sword into Zereth's chest and twisted. Zereth's eyes widened, but the scream died in his throat. The light in his eyes went out. The abyssal being was dead. Chapter 66, Surge in Power, The End 3. Lia stared at the scene of Grey plunging his sword deep into the abyssal being, into Zereth's chest, ending his life with mixed emotions. The things that had happened today, if she told anyone, nobody would believe them. An evolver who had just awakened a week ago had subdued a late-stage first-ranker. The man she thought incapable of becoming an evolver a week ago had now already surpassed her in strength. From afar, Grey looked like a menacing death god, the longsword pulsed with energy as he coldly stared down at Zereth with a grim smile. This scene would forever be etched into Leah's memory, never to be forgotten, even in the moment of death. A being who defied all odds to rise beyond his enemies, that was Grey Lockhart. An unstoppable force of nature that not even death could take hold of. Just then, Lia noticed movement from behind her. Because she couldn't turn her head around, she couldn't see who it was. Swoosh! The next moment, she was yanked upward and she subtly caught the color of the person's hair. It was blonde. There was no doubt about it. The man was none other than Cedric Duskwood, who now stood with a knife at Leah's throat. He wore a fearful expression as he shouted at Grey. "Why you, whoever you are, don't come any closer," Cedric exclaimed as he inched the knife closer to Leah's throat. "If you dare to make a move, I'll kill this woman," Cedric threatened, his voice trembling with fear. Cedric had been observing everything that had happened so far with growing dread. First he had been trapped inside a formation, suffering heavy injuries, but it hadn't taken long for him to heal completely after drinking a healing potion. However, just as he escaped the formation, two terrifying powers had erupted from the warehouse. He'd seen young Master Zereth fighting against a being that looked nothing like a human, a god that descended into the mortal world to eliminate evil. His moves had never been seen before. A being capable of using both energy and telekinesis and physically strong too, he had effortlessly dragged young Master Zereth across the ground, and his cat had sent the young master flying with a single slap from its tiny paw. But that wasn't what shocked Cedric the most. It was the sudden increase in the other party's power. With every step, his power rose step by step until it evenly matched young Master Zereth. The mere sight made Cedric's body tremble with fear. As an abyssal creature, young Master Zereth had been an apex being in the same level, yet he had still been defeated. Under Grey's onslaught, he could do nothing but die under his blade. This made Cedric believe that the man in front of him was a reincarnation of an ancient god. There was no other way to explain Grey's abilities. With no choice left but a will to live, Cedric decided to take Lia hostage and leave the corruption field to get to safety. He knew that this guy had a connection with Lia. That must mean he wouldn't act if Lia were taken hostage. Hearing the shout, Grey glanced at Cedric with a blank look on his face. He looked at Cedric as if he were looking at an idiot. On the other hand, Lia wore a calm expression. She already knew nothing was going to happen to her. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Cedric immediately flinched when Grey's unnaturally glowing purple eyes gazed at him. But he mustered up his courage and spoke. "If you don't do as I say, I'll kill her." However, just as he said that, the knife in his hand began to tremble and soon flew out of his control. He had the knife gripped with all his strength, yet he still couldn't contest control against the powerful presence that descended onto him. The next moment Grey's figure flickered from his spot, and he was right beside Cedric, his long sword pulsating with energy. With Lia out of harm's way and Cedric's grip on her collapsing, Grey swiftly caught her using Heaven's seizing hand and put her a short distance away. "Do it," Grey spoke with a playful smile. "Kill her. Let's see you do it." "Why you?" Cedric's expression was aghast. If you let me leave here today, we of the High Order will personally welcome you into the organization and give you immense benefits. With your talent, the High Order will rise again and you will obtain high status. Our Duskwood family has been in the organization for years. If we recommend you, you will definitely get in." Cedric stammered with a fearful expression as he took a step back and tried to bargain with Grey. To this, Grey merely snorted. "I don't want to affiliate with a bunch of otherworlders and pieces of garbage from the abyss who are trying to destroy this world. Enough chit-chat." Grey brandished his longsword. "It's time for you to die. Since you are a member of the High Order, you naturally will have no chance of escaping here alive." "You." Cedric's expression twisted when he heard Grey's words. The last trace of his sanity slipped away when he heard his death sentence pronounced. With madness descending into his mind, a black pill suddenly appeared in his hand. "If I take this pill, I'll fully transform into an abyssal being." Cedric thought with a crazed expression as he popped the pill into his mouth. He was already a half-transformed abyssal being. Every High Order member was. These transformations boosted their physical strength and altered their evolutionary paths. Cedric, for example, followed the bloodline evolutionary path. He had fused with the powerful bloodline of a third-rank mutated beast, the Shadow Wolf King. But with the abyssal transformation, he would evolve into an abyssal Shadow Wolf bloodline evolutionary pathstrider, a being who could utilize abyssal energy. "This is the final product of the High Order," Cedric exclaimed as his eyes flashed red and a dense black energy erupted from him. Before, these pills only allowed one to use corruption energy, but with the combined efforts of the High Order, we humans too can ascend into higher beings and become abyssal. As he finished his words, his form began to twist. Chapter 67, Surge in Power, The End. 4. Cedric's human form completely vanished. Dense black fur with a hint of gray began forming over his entire body. His structure grew taller and his limbs began to evolve into something that looked more like an animal than a human. His head then fully transformed into that of a wolf with sharp ears and, following that, a thick black horn with gray highlights grew out from his forehead. "This is my final evolution," Cedric exclaimed in a completely foreign voice. "You filthy humans. Be grateful that you were able to witness my ascension to a higher being. This transformation, it is indeed more pronounced than the one that burly guy had back when I underwent my metamorphosis a week ago. Gray nodded with a thoughtful expression. He was not the least bit scared. The guy, even after transforming, was weaker than Zereth. Gray could kill him with a thought using his heaven-seizing hand. At the same time, seeing Cedric transform gave Gray some inspiration, an inspiration for his Nexus Overlock. He had been utilizing Nexus Overlock as a way to temporarily buff his strength. At the same time, following the golden ratio principles of the technique, he realized he could also reverse the technique to buff his own Nexus energy. Both his physical strength and psionic energy were already buffed automatically, as Nexus Overlock also affected the mind. But the thing which lacked the most was his energy. It was still only at the level of the 5th level, of course, weaker than a normal 5th level, as his Death Ascension art was essentially a way to force someone to become stronger in a short amount of time after one died, and this technique drew upon the law of death to make it possible. And due to that, his foundation was unstable. After this, he would have to take some time to solidify his foundation before breaking through again. Back to the topic, his energy was still stuck at the 5th level of the 1st rank, and to make it reach the 9th level similar to his psionic energy and physical strength using Nexus Overlock, he would have to create a reverse circulation sequence in Nexus Overlock, letting the buffed output fold back into his vortex of energy, gradually compressing and elevating his Nexus energy layer by layer. Your comprehension defies the heaven. You've realized the importance of reverse circulation sequence and perfected Nexus Overlock. Instantly, a transformation took place within Gray's vortex of energy. His energy level was climbing up in real time and eventually it reached the level of his physical strength and psionic power. But he didn't stop there. This power of his Nexus Overlock was permanent. As long as he activated it, it wouldn't stop until he deactivated it himself. But it also came with the need to maintain it. For example, if he went unconscious, the skill would automatically stop functioning as there was no force to sustain the golden ratio spiral loop. But if I program the technique to function by itself, then Gray's eyes shone brightly. Your comprehension defies the heaven. You've further perfected Nexus Overlock. The instant that notification rang out, the marks on Gray's hands and eyes dimmed and disappeared. He reverted back to his normal appearance. That was because he completely stopped paying attention to Nexus Overlock and the energy circuit manifestation disappeared in the process. That was because Nexus Overlock was running in a passive state and wouldn't appear unless he was fighting at his full capability or beyond it. With this, the strength from Nexus Overlock would stay as long as he wasn't depleted of energy. He permanently had the strength of a 9th level 1st ranker. But of course, his life level was still stuck at 5th rank and that's what mattered the most. Without advancing his life level, he'd never see the steps of 2nd rank. It's perfect. Gray smiled as he casually stared at Cedric, who was still undergoing transformation. His eyes flashed for a moment and within his interface, a notification popped up. Power, 1st rank, 8th level. Gray nodded at this. This was the appraisal skill he comprehended when he tried to ascertain Zereth's power level. During the process, he had gained more insight into the information layer. It didn't just store technological data, it stored all sorts of data, meaning if he could comprehend more insight into the information layer, his appraisal skill could evolve to the point where he could gain information on someone like when and where they peed last time. And at the same time, he noticed that he could utilize his interface within the corruption field and access the data servers of Blue Star, but Eterna couldn't. These corruption fields were tailor-made to stop Power Ash like Eterna from gaining access. But he, a normal human, wasn't taken into that equation as there was no way a human could access the information layer normally. In fact, he doubted the High Order even knew what an information layer was. Soon, the transformation was over. A dense wave of black energy erupted from Cedric, and he menacingly stared down at Gray with a hint of madness. If Cedric had even an ounce of rational thought left within his mind that had gone mad, then he would have used this time to run away. However, the first thing he did after transforming was rush towards Gray with a feral expression on his face. "Watch out, Gray," Lia called out from afar. Although she couldn't sense the other party's strength, she could still feel a big oppressive air. There was no doubt that he had become far stronger than he was before, and he was a 7th level first ranker previously. However, what she expected didn't happen. Instead, a speechless expression appeared on her face. Gray waved his hand upward and immediately Cedric froze and rose into the air. Before he could even comprehend what happened, his body compressed inward as sword energy erupted from within him, and immediately Cedric burst into a mist of blood. Cedric Duskwood was dead. Gray then went up to Cedric's corpse and took off the spatial ring on his hand and placed it in his own, and he did the same for Xerath's spatial ring. Gray yawned and turned to Lia and spoke, "Time to leave." Lia nodded dumbly. During the time Gray was dealing with Xerath and Cedric, in the inner district of Sector 1, an earth-shattering battle was about to take place. Bees, sheeing, a black beam of energy shot out towards the Ironfang family's headquarters. But before it could hit the mansion, a powerful barrier of earth formed from below the ground and immediately, from all 4 directions, the ground shook and an earthly wall formed. Following that, Torren Ironfang flew into the air with a cold expression on his face. "How can this humble one help you?" Torren spoke coldly as he eyed the guy who stood not far away, wearing a gray hoodie covering his face and only showing his mouth. "Member of the High Order. I don't believe we have any past enmities." "Kuhehehe." The High Order member laughed sinisterly. "We of the High Order don't need a reason to attack anything, especially a nobody like you. Today, my task is to eliminate and uproot the Ironfang family from Nova City." "I'm afraid that will be impossible," Torren said with a solemn look. "You will have to go through me first." As he said that, an oppressive true energy surged out, spreading out into Sector 1. The aura crossed into Sector 2 and even 3. Evolvers who were fighting the High Order members near the corruption fields all looked up. "This aura, a 2nd rank Evolver is taking action. Just you." The High Order member laughed with a snicker. "What can you, an ordinary martial artist, possibly do to me? Friend, if you are done speaking, please make your move." "I like to keep my battles quick," Torren said with a calm gaze. "If we take it too far, the sectors around us will be completely destroyed." "Hey," the High Order member smirked and immediately, dense black energy began to surge out from him. However, just then, the High Order member froze, and in Torren's vision, multiple hands made of shadow appeared out of thin air and clutched onto the High Order member's neck. This shadow." The High Order member's voice trembled in disbelief. "Is this Ghost Blade Daniel?" But before he could utter another word, the hands plunged into all parts of his body and the High Order member fell to the ground, dead. Torren's eyes widened when he saw this. "Who is there? Please show yourself, friend." He called out and scanned the area with his heightened perception, yet nothing appeared in his vision. At the same time, far in the distance, a certain guy with long black hair, an average face, and a t-shirt that wrote, "I love Nova City," stood with a cigarette in his mouth as he stared at Torren from afar. It was none other than Daniel Carter. "To think they would invade Nova City on the same day I was about to go on a date with my wife." Daniel Carter cursed. "I'm retired, dammit, why am I even here?" As he said that, his figure flickered and disappeared. No one knew how he came or where he went. At the same time, in Sector 6, Liebert and Alaric descended. Alaric's expression flashed with a sinister light as he flew behind Liebert. Once they entered the corruption field, he would strike. However, as soon as they inched closer to the corruption field where Lia and Cedric were held in custody, they both saw that the corruption field suddenly dissolved with a bang, and in the center of where there was once a corruption field lay the unconscious body of Lia. Alaric's expression immediately darkened when he saw this. At the same time, A flash of lightning streaked past them and landed at the place where Lia was. It was none other than Albert. Chapter 68, Traitor 1. Time passed swiftly, and before anyone realized it, several hours had gone by. By now, the entire corruption field and the High Order members had been dealt with. Many triumphed, many mourned, and many vowed revenge. Today, Nova City lost thousands of people and evolvers. It was a huge loss for Nova City, but they had successfully repelled the attack from the High Order. They had won. This moment would forever be etched into history. At the same time, the battle-worn evolvers finally had the chance to return to their homes and rest. Richard rushed toward Alyssa and tightly hugged his daughter with a look of relief. "My sweet daughter, you're fine." He spoke in a trembling tone. He had been worried sick. He tried contacting both Alyssa and Gray, yet none of them answered, except Alyssa, who only gave him vague details about the situation. But thinking of Gray made him even more anxious. "That's right. Did Gray call you?" Richard asked with a worried expression. "He hasn't picked up my calls or seen my messages since this morning." "No." Alyssa softly shook her head. She herself didn't know where he had disappeared to for the past 2 days. He said that he was at a friend's house. But, even when she fought across the corruption fields, she never once sensed him. Sector 6 was big, but with her acute true dragon mind perception, it wasn't big enough to hide someone from her. She wasn't the type to assume the worst, but considering the fact that he still hadn't replied, could it be that something had happened? However, just as Alyssa was thinking that, a young man suddenly appeared from the corner of her vision. He wore a slightly torn t-shirt with a hole near the stomach area, his hands in his pockets as he casually walked toward them with a relaxed smile. "Hey guys, I'm back," Gray spoke slowly. Immediately, Richard turned around, and a relieved expression washed over his face. He quickly walked up to Gray and checked him for injuries. Confirming that there were none, he let out a long sigh. "Where were you? Do you know how worried I was?" Hearing that, Gray smiled helplessly. "I really couldn't take any calls or messages. I wasn't in a situation where I could." Richard shook his head. "You just became an evolver. You're still only at the first level. You should have found a safe shelter and stayed hidden. I don't want you taking risks this early, Gray." Richard cared for both his children, and now that his older son had become an evolver too, he was even more anxious. Alyssa had matured as an evolver, and seeing her display her full strength in the incident broadcast, he felt relief that his daughter now possessed the power to protect herself. She was no longer the little girl who used to drag him out for ice cream on his free days. However, the same couldn't be said for Gray. Even though he was older, he had only just awakened. In a world filled with powerful evolvers, Gray's strength seemed insignificant. It was only natural that Richard was this worried. "Level 1, huh?" Gray smiled inwardly. Indeed, to anyone else, he would look like a level 1 evolver. After all, he had only awakened a week ago. How could he possibly reach 2nd rank in such a short time? It was statistically impossible. But what Richard didn't know was that Gray's strength had already surpassed the 9th level of the 1st rank. He had already stepped into the 5th life level of the 1st rank. "It's good that you're back," Richard said with a relieved smile. "Come, let's go home. Your clothes are torn to pieces. Get a shower and change into something proper." With that, the family of 3 headed home. Nova City, Sector 1, in a district, Duskwood Mansion. Bang! The office table split clean in half as Alaric's fist slammed down, shattering the expensive wood. Documents flew through the air as the room trembled with killing intent. Why, he roared, veins bulging on his forehead. This plan was foolproof. How could it fail? His hoarse yet thunderous voice sent chills down the servants' spines outside the door. "Not only that, my grandson Cedric, he's dead." Alaric's eyes burned scarlet, his entire body trembling with barely contained rage. "Dead, and for what? For nothing." His bloodshot gaze locked onto the holographic screen, replaying the same moment again and again, Cedric's body turning to mist. And the murderer's face kept repeating, showing Gray directly. A dark shadow flickered across Alaric's face. His expression distorted. And it's all his fault. His voice dropped into a cold abyss. That brat. I'll make him wish he was never born. The heavy doors slid open with a hiss. A tall man in his 40s walked in, calm and composed, but his eyes carried venom. We already have his information, the man said. I dug through the Blue Star local database. It's old, but accurate enough. Malric Duskwood, current patriarch of the Duskwood family, spoke with chilling steadiness, the kind that made his fury terrifying. He flicked a small data chip toward Alaric. The old man caught it and plugged it into his device. Gray's Evolver license, ID photo, and address were all projected onto the screen. A deadly silence followed. Malric's lips curled into a thin, cruel smile. Father, just say the word, he said, voice low and sharp. I'll tear down his entire block if I have to. I'll make his family beg for death before they get it. Malric stared at the screen, at Gray's calm face, and his fingers twitched violently. He killed our blood, Malric whispered. So we'll answer with blood. His, and everyone tied to him. The holographic light reflected against his twisted expression, making him look almost monstrous. Gray Lockhart, Alaric muttered, every word shaking with wrath. You've started something you can't end. Just then, Alaric's phone rang. The name displayed, Lord Varron. Both Malric and Alaric's expression shifted. Alaric immediately answered and connected the call to the side screen. A robed figure appeared, Lord Varron, the powerhouse the Duskwood family pledged allegiance to. Our plan has failed, Varron said calmly. Young Master Zereth is dead. I believe you both know who killed him. Gray Lockhart, Alaric said with a grim look. If not for him, we would have succeeded, Lord Varron. He is the sole reason we lost. Just give the command, Lord Varron. We'll uproot him and his family entirely, Malric said coldly. I'm afraid it won't be that easy, Varron replied. That girl, Alyssa Lockhart, has direct protection from the Evolver Association. And according to high-order intel, she has met the Federation Master before. We cannot openly act against her or Richard. However, Varron snapped his fingers. The screen shifted and a video began to play. No, you monster, stay away. A desperate voice screamed as the recording played. Gray appeared in the video, a sinister grin on his face as he walked forward. For the High Order, he said. Then he swung his sword and beheaded Cedric. The footage cut abruptly. At first glance, it looked exactly like a Soul Lamp recording. That was also how they got the footage of Gray killing Zereth. Both had soul lamps that recorded their last moments before death. This is. Alaric's expression flickered. It's a fake video created by two high-order specialists who excel in illusion arts, Varron said. Even a Turner wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Use it, Lord Varron commanded. With this video, you'll have justification to eliminate him. That brat likely knows that the Duskwood family is part of the High Order. Eliminate him before he speaks. With this, Alyssa won't be able to intervene, and it won't raise suspicion. And for now, lay low. We already failed once. Acting rashly will bring trouble. Yes, Lord Varron. Both Alaric and Malric replied, madness gleaming in their eyes. They now had a reason, a perfect excuse, to go after Gray Lockhart. And once they captured him, they would make sure he begged for death by the end. Chapter 69, Traitor 2. Sector 1, Inner District. Gray's mansion. Time passed by swiftly, and it was already the next day. After spending some time with his family, he came back to his mansion, 1 to speak with a Turner, and 2, to solidify his foundation. After using the Death Ascension art, his foundation had become extremely unstable. Luckily, he took his time and stabilized it, or else he could have kissed his chances of reaching the second rank goodbye. Gray was still sleeping. However, just then, an alarming sound rang within his mind and he groggily woke up with a yawn. Where did this alarm come from? Gray mumbled in annoyance. He definitely didn't set an alarm himself. However, he soon had his answer. Eterna had magically manifested within his interface. Gray, Eterna said, her tone solemn. You need to run. Leave Nova City immediately. It's no longer safe. Gray tilted his head as he got up from his bed. What happened to you all of a sudden? There is no time for questions, Eterna replied. Check the news feed. Leave now or you'll die. Current projections show a 0% survival rate if you stay. Even I cannot change that. Gray didn't move immediately. Instead, he swiftly opened Starling and entered Nova City's local news site. Immediately, several news feeds popped up on his screen. Potential mastermind. Evolver Gray Lockhart revealed as High Order member, cold-bloodedly murders the Duskwood family's descendant, Cedric. The Duskwood family demands justice. An elite squad dispatched to hunt Gray Lockhart. Duskwood family places a bounty of 50,000 Union credits on Gray Lockhart, dead or alive. Wanted, Gray Lockhart, age 17. And below it was a video of Gray killing Cedric while wearing the demeanor of a High Order member. Seeing this, Gray frowned. Is that me? I didn't think they would go this far. Gray had a solemn look on his face. The news article already had over 1 million views, meaning almost every citizen in Nova City had seen it. He deserves death. That bastard killed someone from the Duskwood family. Wasn't he a student from NOVA 5 High? I heard he wasn't a good person. He killed Cedric Duskwood. That's already a death sentence by itself. Someone said the Duskwood family dispatched the elite evolvers of the family. Run all you want, Gray Lockhart, you'll still die. If I see him, I'll report him immediately. I want those 50k Union credits. People like him shouldn't exist. The High Order should be wiped out completely. He probably planned the entire High Order attack. He's a spy who infiltrated the city. City Lord Liebert, what are you doing? The citizens are demanding justice. Justice. I lost my brother in that battle. That scum should be executed publicly. No wonder the corruption field erupted like that. It was all planned. People like him hide in plain sight. They could be anyone, even your neighbor. Can someone track his signal? Someone from the tech division, locate him. Why hasn't the Federation announced anything yet? Are they trying to protect him? If the City Lord protects that murderer, he's no better than the High Order themselves. Execute him. Execute him. Execute him. Comments poured in like a flood, most filled with anger, confusion, and hatred toward the High Order. And with no real target to direct their rage at, the civilians of Nova City cursed Gray Lockhart, who was now officially identified as a High Order member. Gray stared at the screen for a long time. The bright headlines and hateful remarks reflected in his eyes, each word echoing in his mind. He neither frowned nor sighed. His expression didn't change. So this is how they want to play it, he murmured quietly. I expected retaliation from the Duskwood family, but I never thought they would go this far. Gray spoke softly and sighed. There goes my dream of living a calm, quiet life and developing quietly. As he watched the comments pour in, Gray realized one thing: his normal life was over. Starting today, everything would change completely. It's likely an illusion crafted by a High Order illusionist. Because of that, I cannot confirm whether it's true or false, Eterna's voice echoed in his mind. We could try putting the videos you captured into the corruption field using the leftover drones. It's useless. Gray sneered. Who do you think they will believe? Me, a nobody with no background, or the Duskwood family that has stood for years as Nova City's so-called protectors and backbone? The answer is obvious. There's no time to waste. Gray clicked his tongue and swiftly made his way to the wardrobe. This mansion was under the radar of the three families. It had risen suddenly without prior notice, and there was no information about its owner. If they were to begin searching, they would definitely start with a place like this. And being eerily close to the three big families was also not a good option. It was like letting himself be caught on purpose. He had to leave Nova City. There was no place for him here anymore. Starting today, Gray Lockhart would be a criminal. At the same time, numerous notifications began flooding his interface, missed calls from both Richard and, surprisingly, Alyssa as well. There was even a missed call from Evan. But he didn't have the time to answer their calls. And he probably wouldn't be able to speak to them for a very long time after this. He swiftly packed all his clothes inside the mansion with a calm yet cold expression and left without turning back. His next destination was the Outer Ring. From there, he would enter the deep forest and leave the Tri-City province entirely. Blue Spirit City and Crimson City weren't safe either, as they were both directly connected to Nova City. He would flee to the very ends of the southern region. He dashed through the streets, his figure flickering as he passed through Sector 1, then 2, 3, and 4. With no taxi willing to pick him up and every public transport system on high alert because of the bounty, there was only one option left: run. He emptied one energy potion after another, feeling the burning surge of energy coursing through his veins, yet he didn't stop, not even for a breath. Only when the towering walls of Sector 6 came into view did he finally slow his pace. He stood there quietly, overlooking the residential area in the distance. He knew the news had already reached Richard and Alyssa. Part of him wanted, just for a moment, to tell them he wasn't in the wrong. That everything was a setup. But no amount of words could change anything now. Not until he dragged the real culprits into the light. And besides, time was no longer a luxury he possessed. On the way here, he had crossed paths with countless low-level Duskwood family members. He avoided them without alerting them and successfully made it to the outer sectors. As long as he crossed Nova City's final boundary, he would be beyond their jurisdiction. However, Gray's expression suddenly changed. Several powerful auras exploded around the area like a tightening net, each one belonging to a late-stage first-rank evolver, most likely at the 8th or 9th level. A dozen figures burst forward and landed heavily on the road ahead, their footsteps cracking the pavement beneath them. Each of them wore a combat uniform marked with a black bird insignia. The symbol of the Duskwood family. It's him, Gray Lockhart. Chapter 70, Traitor 3. There were about 4 8th or 9th rank evolvers, and all of them wore the Duskwood family badge, which had the logo of a black crow. And just above them was a flying drone. Everyone, we have found him. The evolver in the center spoke. We will now subdue him. Gray glanced at the drone slightly and sighed. He was already aware of the purpose of this drone. It was a stream drone. While he was traveling to Sector 6, he had already seen the live streams on the way. That was also why he managed to avoid many Duskwood family evolvers. But, in the end, he still got caught. There he is. I can see him on the feed. Lock him up. Don't let him blink. Is that really Gray Lockhart? That's him, right. Finally. Took them long enough. Execute him. Public execution now. This is what happens when you stab a Duskwood. No mercy. Why is he so calm? Surrender yourself, you filthy High Order member. The evolver in the center said righteously. Gray's eyes flashed slightly. The people present here both knew who the real High Order member was, but Gray didn't say anything about it and simply spoke. What if I won't surrender? Gray asked with a calm smile on his face. What are you going to do to me? Do you believe you can stop me? How arrogant. Those are high-ranking evolvers of Duskwood, the core of the family. Does he think he can win against them? What we will do. The evolver in the center had a cold expression as he unleashed his aura. Then we will have no choice but to resort to violence. The patriarch of the family has already commanded us that we can eliminate you directly. As soon as he spoke, the other evolvers' expressions changed, and they too unleashed their auras. Seeing this, the livestream chat went wild. They are going to attack. Kill him. Eliminate the High Order member. Kill. The evolver at the center, clearly a 9th level first ranker, shouted and charged forward. The other evolvers followed right behind him. They all unleashed their killing intent. Seeing this, Gray smiled coldly and spoke. Since you lot have decided to kill me, then I don't need to hesitate either." As he said that, a powerful aura surged out from him and a sword materialized in his hand. He hadn't brought Mimi back since the last battle with Zereth, and he definitely wasn't going to bring it out now either, as it could reveal his own identity in the future through the cat. Purple-black sword energy surged, and the circles on the edges of the sword glowed with a deep violet light. Then Gray swung. BZZZ. Sword energy shot out from his weapon in a wave and directly charged toward the 9th level evolver. The Duskwood family evolver, seeing this, was alarmed and tried to dodge to the side, but to his dismay, the sword energy was slightly faster than him. The sound of flesh tearing apart rang out as Gray's sword energy tore into the evolver's shoulder. Seeing this, the entire livestream fell silent. Opening square bracket ? Closing square bracket. Did he just injure a late-stage first ranker? How old is he? 17. Monster. This must be some power-enhancing technique from the high order. The group of evolvers, seeing this, didn't stop their momentum. They grunted and charged forward. Seeing this, Gray merely laughed. "You want to stop me?" A wide grin formed on his face. "You'll have to be born twice before that happens." As he said that, patterns emerged on his hands and eyes, crackling with Nexus energy. Boom. Calmly, Gray took a step forward and instantly, the air distorted. Before anyone could even see what happened, the group of 8th level first rank evolvers fell to the ground one by one with looks of disbelief on their faces. All dead. Opening square bracket ? Closing square bracket. Opening square bracket ? Closing square bracket. The entire livestream fell silent when they saw the sight. Gray's eyes crackled with dense purple energy as he stared down at the injured 9th level evolver, who was now looking at him with a look of horror. He had taken down 4 8th rank evolvers in one move. This level of strength, it wasn't something the man could match at all. Gray then slowly walked toward him with his long sword in hand. "You, stay back," the 9th level ranker shouted as he took a step back. He felt a crushing presence emerging from the young man in front of him. It made his energy tremble, refusing to come out under the young man's pressure. "I would have let you go if you weren't a member of the Duskwood," Gray said coldly. Then, unleashing Nexus Overlock at full power, he closed the distance between them and cleaved the 9th level first ranker's head off. But just then, Gray's expression changed. He looked up into the sky and immediately sensed an oppressive aura descending. It was a second ranker. "Run!" Gray exclaimed in his mind as Nexus Overlock surged faster than before. Behind him was danger, and he had to escape. At the same time, within the Lockhart household before the evolvers attacked Gray, both Alyssa and Richard anxiously looked at the TV. "No, all of this has to be a lie," Richard said with a downcast look. "My son would never do that." "Dad, don't worry. I've already contacted the Evolvers Association. I'm sure they know something." Alyssa tried to comfort Richard with a heavy expression. But, was it really him? Alyssa's heart wavered slightly. She had already asked the Eterna system, and the video was proven to be true and not artificially made up. Thinking back to the past few days where Gray suddenly stopped coming home only made him seem even more suspicious. While she didn't want to believe that Gray was the culprit, a part of her also told her that he might have indeed done it. But on the other hand, it made no sense for Gray to abruptly eliminate a 7th level first ranker like Cedric Duskwood. After all, he had only awakened a week ago. However, just as Alyssa thought that, the live television shifted and a new screen appeared. Inside the screen was Gray, and in front of him was a group of Duskwood cultivators. "My son," Richard shouted in anxiety. "No, they found him." Richard had a look of disbelief and shock. No, this can't happen. "Gray, run, my son." Almost as if he had lost his sanity, Richard shouted in distress. Even if his son was a world criminal, a son was still a son, and he didn't want Gray to be caught. Then, the very next moment, Both Richard and Alyssa fell silent. They saw Gray cleaving apart the 4 8th rank evolvers and then killing the 9th level ranker with a cold gaze. However, instead of being sad that his son was a cold-blooded murderer, Richard was excited. "Yes," Richard exclaimed. "Run, my son, run. Now is your chance. Don't let them catch you. Those Duskwood bastards definitely forged that video. I know my son better than anyone." Hearing this, Alyssa glanced strangely at Richard. But at the same time, it made sense. Gray was his son. If he didn't support him, then who would? At the same time, Alyssa sighed. She was now conflicted about whether he was truly the murderer and had worked for the High Order or not. She denied it because of his lack of power, but the prowess he displayed just now was strong enough to cut down several 8th level first rankers and even dispatch a 9th level one. And remembering the fact that he was a reincarnator only added fuel to her doubts. "I don't know," Alyssa mumbled under her breath.